Well, good morning again. If you're wondering if I look familiar, that's because I do. I get to do lots of stuff today. It's great. Excited to be with you and get to preach this morning. I missed you all last week. If you don't know who I am, my name's Kevin. I get to be an assistant pastor here at the church, and last week I was not here. I was not playing hooky. I love the church, and I missed you all. I was actually in Ottawa at a retreat with Pastor Peter and Helene, who, if you're new, they're the former pastors here, but we still call them pastor. They're amazing. But it was just a really, really great time. Really, it was just a gift to connect to the ACOP, which, if you're not familiar with that, that's the family of churches that we are connected to. And it was just an incredible time. I actually shared this with Pastor Peter when I was there, but I was like, I don't even really know how I got here. The journey that God has had my wife and I on has been pretty wild the last few months, but it was just such a gift. It was so refreshing, so encouraging, so inspiring, and so I really enjoyed it, but I also really missed here. So I'm extra excited to be here. And I want to say too, if you are new, extra special welcome to you. Thank you so much for spending your Sunday morning with us. We'd love to connect with you, love to chat with you. And we are all about helping people find and follow Jesus. So if you don't even really know who Jesus is, you are in the right place. If you have been following him for years and years and decades, you're in the right place. We'd love to help you along the journey any way that we can. So that is that. We have been doing this series called Divine Interruptions. So Pastor Nathan has shared a couple messages on this. Last week, he talked about how Jesus interrupts our brokenness with his healing. And the previous week, he talked about Jesus interrupting our ordinary lives and calling us to something greater. And so today, I'm going to continue this series of divine interruptions, talking about just moments when something unexpected happens. But we're going to kind of change things a little bit. Instead of talking about how Jesus interrupts us, we're going to look at a story and talk about us interrupting Jesus. Because Jesus is interruptible. And I think this will be a good reminder for all of us that we can interrupt Jesus no matter what's going on or no matter what the circumstances are. We can interrupt Jesus. So let's pray together. Let's just invite Jesus even more into this time. God, we thank you. We thank you for this time together. Thank you for this church, God. Thank you for these people who are after you. Thank you for every single person watching online and in this room. And God, we just ask that you would have your way with the rest of our time together. I pray that you would work on people's hearts, God, that you would speak, whether or not you are using my words, God. Please just speak and have your way. Amen. All right, so if you have your Bibles, who still carries paper Bibles? Is anybody? Yes. Okay, good. We got a few. That's good. I still like paper Bibles. But if you have your phone, that's allowed too. Go ahead and turn to Mark 4. We're going to look at verse 35 to 41. And as we do, I'm going to kind of take my time to walk through this story. I want to just observe a few things, pull apart a few points of this. And there will kind of be a couple side thoughts, but the main thing that we're looking at is how interruptible Jesus is. He's very interruptible. So, just to give you a little bit of context, in this story, Jesus has just finished a very long day of teaching to his crowds and disciples and his followers, and a lot of parables. So he's told a lot of stories, and he's kind of tired, as we will see. So he's had a long day, and this is where we pick up the story in verse 35. It says, "On that day, when evening had come, he said to them," so this is Jesus talking to his disciples. He said to them, "Let us go across to the other side." And leaving the crowd, they took him with them in the boat just as he was. And other boats were with him. and a great windstorm arose. Everyone say great. A great windstorm arose. And the waves were breaking into the boat so that the boat was already filling. I just want to point out that Jesus had, at this point, he's got a few disciples, and not all of them were fishermen, but some of them were. So some of them made their living out on the waters. And as we'll see in a minute, they were, totally terrified. So this is not just, some ordinary storm. This is the severe storm, and they are scared for their lives. So this is a big deal. It's a great windstorm. But he, Jesus, was in the stern, asleep on the cushion. I just love how Jesus has this supernatural ability to nap. Who likes naps? Sunday afternoon naps? Anyone? Oh, man, they're it's spiritual. It is. God says rest, so I do my best. Sunday afternoons, not always, but oh, man, I love my naps. But he was in the stern, asleep on the cushion. So this crazy storm is happening, and Jesus is just sleeping. And they woke him, and they said to him, "Teacher, do you not care that we are perishing?" And I think this is a great insight into all of us, isn't it? When we're afraid, we just tend to freak out at, the nearest person. We're because, and we'll see Jesus' response, but if I was Jesus, thank goodness I'm not, but if I was Jesus, I would have been what do you mean do I care? I'm here. I'm God, and I decided to walk on earth, suffer all these crazy things for you. What do you mean do I not care? It's a ridiculous statement, really, because everything that Jesus is doing is in care and love and concern. And yet, the disciples are afraid, their emotions are way out of whack, and they just kind of freak out on Jesus. And I think we can all relate to that a little bit, right? We get emotional, something happens, and we just take it out on whoever is closest. But I love Jesus' response. He awoke and rebuked the wind and said to the sea, "Peace, be still." And the wind ceased, and there was a great calm. Can you imagine being in that moment? 30 seconds before, the waves are crashing, everything's crazy, the wind is howling, and suddenly it's just totally quiet. It's probably still the middle of the night, everything's dark, and it's quiet, and it's calm. That would have been unbelievable to be in that moment of such contrast. The craziest storm you've probably ever been in to this supernatural calm across the sea. And he said to them, "Why are you so afraid? Have you still no faith?" And they were filled with great fear and said to one another, "Who then is this that even the wind and the sea obey him?" It's a bit of a side note, but there's an interesting phrase that Jesus says. He says, "Why are you so afraid? Have you still no faith?" I think there's a strong implication here that if you are operating out of fear, you are not operating out of faith. One of my friends in ministry school, we were just having kind of a random conversation, and he said something along the lines of, "Fear is a terrible decision maker." If you are making decisions based on fear, it's a really, really bad way to make decisions. And we've all done it, right? We've all been scared and made a reactionary decision and trying to protect ourselves. But if we're operating out of faith, fear has no place. Anyways, that's a bit of a side note, but I felt challenged by it. Oh, Jesus, help me operate out of faith, not out of fear. And I also think it's a little bit interesting because at the start of this passage, Jesus says, "Let's go to the other side." And so he hasn't changed his mind at this point. He's not "Oh, there's a big storm. Maybe we should turn around." He's we're going to the other side. And also, he's in the boat, right? And everybody, we all know Jesus is not going to drown in this storm. He is destined to die, but this is not the way it's going to go. It's like watching a movie and the main character is in some sort of danger, and you're yeah, but they can't kill off the main character. They can't kill off Jesus at this part of the story. And so I just want to remind you, whatever circumstances you're in, whatever storm you're in, if Jesus called you to something, he hasn't changed his mind. If you're in like a really hard place financially, but you know that you're doing exactly what he's told you to do, he hasn't changed his mind. Or maybe it's a relationship that just feels like, man, is this even worth it anymore? But if God called you to it, he hasn't changed his mind. I want to be in faith no matter what the circumstances come. But the overall story here is that the disciples interrupt Jesus and the storm stops. And so this is what I all want us to catch. Like, how can we catch sight of the idea of like, let's just interrupt Jesus a whole lot more? I wanted to invite him into every circumstance of my life, every storm, everything that's happening. And so what if we did that? What if we caught hold of that Jesus is interruptible, and actually live that way every day? I think there's lots of things that can happen, but I think one of the things that could happen is that the storm might just stop. Like, that's what happened here. They're in the craziest storm, they're scared for their lives, and suddenly there's no storm anymore. And again, like, probably every single person in here could point to some area of your life that feels like a storm. Yeah? Is everybody going through storms? I definitely am. There's like some. Actually, lift up your hands. Let's go. Come on. Wake you up. Let's go. There we go. Okay, good. I'm glad. Those of you who didn't raise your hands, that's great. Teach me how to live, because I don't know how to do that. So I think if we interrupt Jesus, if we go to Jesus, interrupt him, invite him into our storms, sometimes he's going to calm the storms. And that circumstance is going to figure itself out. But the other thing might happen, and that is that we might learn how to endure the storms better. Because Jesus might calm your storm, or he might do something else entirely. And I know for me, sometimes when I'm going through hard situations, this is actually very current for me. I am learning this, it feels like again, just the last few weeks, that whenever I am in a moment that feels like a storm, I want Jesus to calm the storm, like fix the circumstance. But often what I really need is I need Jesus to speak to the storm that's inside of me and say, hey, you can have peace inside of there, even if all of the world feels like it's spinning out of control. And so sometimes he's going to calm your storms. And I think other times when we interrupt Jesus, he's going to be like, why don't you just take a nap with me? Like, let's just hang out. Don't worry about the storms. Like, it'll solve itself. We'll figure it out. But like, you need to be in peace no matter what the circumstances are. Philippians 4 talks about the peace that passes understanding. And you know what's challenging about that to me? Is that means that I can't understand. Because if I understand what's going on, then I don't get this peace. It's like, do you want to understand or do you want to have peace? And for me, most of the time, I choose, I want to understand. I want to figure it out. Why is this happening? How do I make it stop? But Jesus invites us to peace that passes understanding, that goes over all of that. And so when we interrupt Jesus, when we invite him into our storms, sometimes it's going to calm, and other times he's just going to bring us peace inside of us. Sometimes we just get to nap with Jesus through the storms. You guys know King David? He was a pretty great character, kind of known as the greatest king of Israel, conquered Goliath, all of these great things. And I think that one of the aspects of his life that made him into this great man, that made him made him described as a man after God's own heart, was the fact that he got really good at interrupting Jesus, interrupting God. He wrote this Psalm 142, and he actually wrote this in a cave, hiding for his life from people who were hunting him down. How many of you think that sounds like a storm? When people are hunting you down and you're hiding in a cave, that doesn't sound like a good circumstance. And so in verse 2 of Psalm 142, David writes, I pour out my complaint before him. I tell my trouble before him. David really knew who to talk to when he was in a tough spot. And you'll notice that he didn't really talk to his friends or his family. He didn't complain to his leaders, or he had followers at this point. He didn't go to them and be like, man, life really sucks right now. He went to God and he poured out his complaint to him. And I think this is just so critical. When we're going through a tough spot, just like the disciples, we need to interrupt Jesus. And even if it comes off a little bit harsh, Jesus actually doesn't mind. You'll notice that he didn't freak out at the disciples and I was thinking, if I was Jesus, I probably would have hopped over the edge of the boat and walked my way to land and be like, see you guys, I'm done with you. I'll find some other followers that are, less fearful. But Jesus can take it. He can take our emotions and our frustrations and our fears and our disappointments. And David knew this, so he brought all of that to God. If you feel like you need to vent, you should probably talk to Jesus. If you have complaints, talk to Jesus. If you're disappointed at God, talk to Jesus too. He can take all of that. But I also want to say that I think one thing that we could all get better at too is interrupting properly. And what I mean by this is I think a lot of us, myself included, my prayer times can sometimes look like, me running to Jesus and being like, okay, Jesus, here's 14 things that I need you to fix. Thanks, bye. And then that's it, right? How many of you can kind of relate to that? You have your list of things, please fix all of these, and then that will be great. And I do that all the time. And I don't think that's relationship. I don't think that's connection. I don't think that's real prayer. I think that's complaining. Bill Johnson is one of my favorite preachers, and I once heard him say something along the lines of this. If you end a prayer time just as discouraged as when you started, you were not praying. You were complaining. And I think that's really true. If you end a prayer time just as discouraged as when you started, you weren't actually praying. You were just complaining. And look, I think we need to start with complaining sometimes. I think we need to pour all of that out. But where we often get tripped up is that we don't wait for God to step in and change something. We just lay it all at his feet and then run away. If you read the rest of this psalm that David wrote, he ends on a really high note. He reminds himself of what God has done in the past and there's still hope. It starts with complaining, but it doesn't end there. It ends with hope and God, you've done it before. I don't know how this is going to work, but it's going to be good. He connected with the goodness of God. That even though I'm in this cave, God, you are still good. And so I just want to encourage all of us that when we're talking about interrupting Jesus, pouring out our complaints at him, we need to do all of those things, but then we need to wait and see what he says. And sometimes he's going to calm the storm, and sometimes he's just going to be like, hey, my peace is going to be enough for you. You're going to learn how to have joy in these circumstances. You're going to learn to worship even when you don't feel like it. Yeah. So I just want to say we need to interrupt, but we need to interrupt in the right way. We can't just lay it and then run away, because that's not connection, that's not prayer. Yeah, it is good, right? Amen. Jesus is interruptible. We can invite him into every storm of our lives. And he will always do something. It won't always be what you want him to do, but he will always do something. And so we need to be open to whatever he wants to do inside of that storm. So why do we hesitate? Because I know for me, sometimes I can hesitate to invite Jesus in. And I think there are a few mindsets that we can have that will hinder our ability or maybe our willingness to interrupt Jesus. And so I want to talk about 3 mindsets pretty briefly and just try to address what is the underlying thing that makes us hesitate when it comes to interrupting Jesus. Because hopefully we all agree, interrupting Jesus sounds like a good idea. Either way, we win. Either the storms get calm or there's calm inside of us. It's a good deal. So why do we hesitate to interrupt Jesus? So I want to talk about 3 mindsets and just try to tackle these in And maybe you'll recognize yourself, maybe you won't. Maybe you're further along than I am, and that's great too. But I think these will be helpful for us as we move towards interrupting Jesus on a regular basis. The first one is that we wonder if he's scared of our mess, or if our mess is too big, or if we're too broken. And I think there's a few different ways to describe this. I'll just share one of my journeys, probably the hardest season of my life. There was a really important relationship in my life that had deteriorated almost overnight, it felt like. And at the same time, I was trying to make these decisions that were like life-changing and felt really high stakes for me. Like, if I don't make this right, I'm going to ruin my life. In retrospect, that wasn't true. It all worked out. But in that moment, I faced so much hurt and confusion and frustration and disappointment, and I was really struggling with self-doubt. Like, I can remember having thoughts like, I might be ruining my life. And like, in retrospect, again, I'm like, no, Kevin, you were not ruining your life. If you had made a mistake, it would have been fine. But in that moment, I was like, this is it. Like, I need to make the right decision or it's over. And in the middle of that season, so this is, again, I would describe this personally, so far in my life, this is the biggest storm that I had been in. And I can remember that I had friends that I had invited into the journey, and especially family into the journey, and like they were helping me. But I noticed that I kind of started withdrawing from God. And I was like, this is kind of interesting. Why am I doing that? And I realized that I had switched into this mode where, because I was so fearful over what I might be doing to my own life, I was trying to basically protect Jesus from whatever mess I might turn out to be. Like, hey, Jesus, your reputation is pretty good, but if you stay friends with me, like, I might be totally ruining my life. And if that happens, like, you might just want to, like, wait until the dust settles, like, let me figure myself out, and if I turn out good, then, like, we can reconnect. Does that kind of make sense? It's almost like if you were, I don't know, like if you found yourself descending into, addictions to drugs or something like that, and you know you're going into a dark spot, and you start to like sever ties with your family and friends because you're like, you probably don't want to know me anymore. Like, I'm messed up, like, save yourself. If I figure this all out, then we can be friends again. And that's what I was doing to Jesus. I was like, hey, Jesus, I don't know how this is going to land. Why don't you just like step back for a bit and like, let me sort myself out. And I had this encounter with Jesus. It's still like probably one of the greatest moments in my life with Jesus, because I had this moment and I just felt that. I was like, Jesus, you don't want to be close to me. I don't know how this is going to work out. But man, Jesus is way more committed to us than we are to him. And I had this moment with Jesus where it was like, I can't get away from him, even if I wanted to. Like, if I try to squirm out of his arms, he's still got me. It's like, if a dad had a child next to some train tracks and the kid is like, super hyper and wants to get down and like run on the train tracks. That dad has his kid tight, right? Like, it doesn't matter how much you squirm and try to get out. And that's what I felt in that moment. I was like, oh, it actually doesn't matter if I invite you into this storm or not. Like, you're still going to be here. And the more I let him in, the more I interrupt him and invite him in, the better it's going to go. But I want to tell you, if you feel like you're alone, you're really not. Jesus is way more committed to you and your journey than you've ever been committed to him. And this is just a moment for me where I was like, okay, like I can't stop you from being connected to me. It doesn't matter. If I had burned my life to the ground, I know that Jesus would have been right there with me. He was so committed to me, and it didn't, like, obviously Jesus matters. Jesus cares about our lives, but in that moment, as far as him being close to me and committed to me, it wouldn't have mattered what my life turned out to be. If I had totally ruined everything, Jesus would have been right there with me. And so I just want to encourage you, if you feel like you're not sure how this is going to go, like this might be too big for Jesus, it's not. He's already right there with you. You just need to let him in. You need to interrupt him and invite him into your storm. he's really not scared. He's not scared of the storm. He's not scared of the mess. He's not scared of all the what ifs. How is this going to work? So that's one of the mindsets. I think that we can be afraid that our mess is a little bit too big for God. And another mindset that I want to tackle is that I think sometimes we are not sure if he's willing to do anything. We doubt that he's willing. And I think you can kind of see this a little bit in the disciples. Whenever they go to Jesus, they're like, don't you care? Like, why aren't you doing anything? Are you even willing to act and do anything? And we see this elsewhere in Scripture too, in the story of Lazarus and him raising from the dead. Before he is resurrected, the sister of Lazarus goes to Jesus and basically says, like, what's the deal? Like, why didn't this happen? Like, my brother is dead, and then you can see all of the disappointment there and the frustration and the like, God, aren't you willing to do anything? So I think most of us, if we've grown up in church, we kind of get that, like, God can do what he wants, like, he's all-powerful, he kind of, he can do whatever. But I think sometimes we doubt that he's actually willing to do anything. And I think it's because we've been disappointed before. And like I said in the past, when you interrupt Jesus, he's not always going to solve the problem the way that you want him to. Again, sometimes he's going to calm the storms. Sometimes he's just going to speak into your heart. And I think our disappointment comes when we have expectations of how God is going to act. So we interrupt him, and we're like, okay, Jesus, like, come do your thing. Like, do that supernatural thing where you fix everything. And Jesus doesn't respond the way that we want him to. He, maybe he brings peace to you, or maybe he's trying to do something else. He's trying to work in your life in some way, or whatever it is. But I think we can get disappointed because we don't actually see what God's doing, because we're so focused on, like, this is what I think you should do, and if you don't do that, I don't believe you're doing anything at all. So I just want to challenge all of us, like, if you feel disappointed with Jesus, talk to him about it. Bring that to him. But we need to keep on interrupting him and allow him to do what he wants in that moment. Because once Jesus is part of the story, like, it gets better. We don't always know how, but it gets better. Because otherwise, if we linger in this disappointment, we can kind of get into this stance of like, well, you didn't help me last time, so why should I bother interrupting you this time? If the disciples had been in a storm a week previous, and Jesus was there, and they interrupted him, and he was like, nah, whatever, and, like, kept sleeping, they probably wouldn't have interrupted him, because they're like, we're disappointed from the last time. Why would we bother Jesus again? But it's just because our perception is, if you didn't do it the way I want you to, you didn't do anything at all. So we need to just open up our hearts, our minds, our souls again to Jesus. We need to be willing to interrupt him. And we need to let him act the way he wants to. And we pray for what we want, right? We pray for, God, please, like, end this storm. Or whatever it is. But we need to be open to whatever it is Jesus wants to do, however he wants to act. Because otherwise, this disappointment will just keep us from inviting Jesus into anything. And every time Jesus enters a story, it gets better. So if you're living, afraid or hesitating to interrupt Jesus, we need to get over that. And again, bring all of that to him. Bring your disappointment to him. Bring your frustration to him. Bring all of that to him. I also want to look at another verse. This is in Hebrews chapter 4. So again, if you have your Bibles, you can pull that out. But Hebrews 4, verses 15 to 16 is what we're going to look at. And to set a little bit of context, we actually don't know who wrote the book of Hebrews, but we know that it was to Hebrews. It was to Jewish people. And so they, in this book, the author is talking about a high priest and about how Jesus has become our high priest. How many of you have high priests today, right now? Probably not. We do have Jesus. Jesus is our high priest. That's the point. But as far as, like, the traditional Jewish high priest, probably no one. And so this is a little bit of a concept that's a bit foreign to us, but it's very familiar to the original audience. And yeah, so we're talking about Jesus in these verses. And in verse 15 of Hebrews 4, it says, "We do not have a high priest." So it's talking about Jesus. We have Jesus, and he is not unable to sympathize with our weaknesses, but one who is in every respect has been tempted as we are, yet without sin. Let us then with confidence draw near to the throne of grace, that we may receive mercy and find grace to help in time of need. Jesus gets it. He knows that it's hard. Like, he understands our weaknesses. He actually lived as a man. He gets that it's hard. And I think sometimes we hesitate to talk to Jesus because we're like, he won't get it. Like, he doesn't understand how hard this actually is for me. Like, it really does suck being in whatever this circumstance is. Jesus actually gets it. He's not afraid of the fact that it's hard. He's not like, pick yourself up. Let's go. Stop complaining. He's like, no, bring all of it. I get that it's hard. I get that you're weak. I get that it's frustrating. But we need to draw near to the throne of grace so that we can have help in time of need. When you're in need, we need to go to Jesus. Another thing that I think sometimes makes us hesitate is that we do actually doubt that he's able. And I know that might seem a little bit strange, especially, you've grown up in church, God can do everything, we all know that. But I think sometimes when, the rubber hits the road day to day, we're actually not positive, Jesus, do you actually know about this? Can you actually help with this? For me, I work part-time here at the church. I work part-time as a software developer, and I am trying to grow in inviting Jesus into my software development. Because I can have this tendency of God doesn't know how to program. How could he know how to solve this programming issue that I'm facing and have been pounding my head against the wall to? But the reality is that he actually does. He knows about programming. He knows about carpentry. He knows about whatever it is that you're dealing with. If you're, in the medical industry, he created the body, right? He created math. He created the components that make up a computer. So I want to say, for me, I feel challenged to, Jesus, how do I solve this programming issue that I'm facing? I want to be better at that. And I'm, very, very slowly growing. But whenever I actually do invite him and interrupt him and invite him into those moments, I find, oh, yeah, okay. I'm a little bit more productive. I can kind of understand things a little bit quicker. And I find myself yeah, okay, I'm a little bit more efficient whenever I invite Jesus into what I'm doing. So I just encourage you, if it's a really small thing, maybe it's your daily job and it just feels oh, God doesn't know anything about this. He really does. He understands all of it. He can give you, moments of inspiration and revelation in everything that we do. And he's fully able to help me with my programming, to help you in whatever you're doing, no matter how small or big it is. If you stub your toe, Jesus is able. If there's a war in the Middle East, Jesus is still able. He's still God. We need to interrupt him for everything in our life. He's got enough time for you. It's not too small. As we close our time together, I want to remind you that Jesus is interruptible. He's waiting for you. He's ready for you. He has time for you. And I hope all of us have felt encouraged and challenged to step into this a little bit more. And maybe even as I've been talking, there have been, circumstances or storms in your life that have come to mind, and you're oh, yeah, I need to interrupt Jesus about that and talk to him about that. And maybe he'll calm that storm. Maybe he'll just make it all go away. Or maybe he'll give you peace that you wouldn't have thought possible. Either way, the story gets better when Jesus gets involved. So I encourage you, if you're, maybe some of these mindsets too, you're a little bit afraid that because he didn't do what you thought he was going to last time, maybe he won't do anything this time. Maybe you're facing disappointment, and I just want to say, bring it to him. Talk to him about it. Let him into those moments. And I believe as a church, as we step into this, as a community, if we get better at just interrupting Jesus, we're going to be more resilient. Like, it doesn't matter what storms come. We don't know what's ahead, right? For each of us individually or as a community, we're not sure what's ahead. But if we get good at just like, I'm going to talk to Jesus about this, I'm going to interrupt Jesus about this, we're going to get more resilient. We'll be healthier people. We'll be more full of joy and peace and hope. And we'll be able to weather any storm because we know who is in the boat with us. So I want to just say, like, for myself and hopefully for all of us, let's commit to this. Let's interrupt him more. Let's let him into our struggles, into our situations. And we're going to sing one more worship song. As we do, I want to say, first of all, especially if you just feel prodded by anything that has happened in the last 35 minutes, anything I've said or anything the Holy Spirit said to you, just connect with him first. If you feel like, oh yeah, there's this one storm, and like, I haven't really talked to God about that because, of whatever reasons. First off, just connect with God and be like, hey, please step into this moment. And then wait for him to respond, right? Like, sit there for a minute. What do you say about this, Jesus? Is the circumstances just going to go away, or are you going to give me peace? Are you going to give me a strategy for dealing with it? So I want to say, first of all, as we're worshiping, just connect to him first. Figure out what it is that he wants you to do in response to this. But then, I also want to encourage you to come up for prayer, because this is part of weathering storms too. We interrupt Jesus, but there's also plenty in the Bible that talks about bearing one another's burdens and like connecting with fellow believers. So we'd love to pray for you if you have anything going on in your life, whether it's, a big storm or a small storm or just, whatever else is going on. I encourage you to come up to the front. We'd love to pray for you.